My mother-in-law took all the other grandkids out for a fun day, but left my 6-year-old son alone in a parking lot with no water, no shade, and no explanation. When I found him terrified and waiting exactly where she told him, I walked inside and said something that made the entire room go silent. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The late summer heat pressed down on Prescott, Arizona like a weight Patrick Monroe could feel through the windshield of his truck. The air conditioning wheezed as he turned onto the access road leading to Copper Mesa Recreation Park, the temperature gauge on the dashboard reading 94 degrees. He'd been running errands all afternoon. Hardware store, post office, picking up groceries. Virginia had texted him about 3 times to remember. And now he was 20 minutes late to pick up Martin from what was supposed to be a fun family outing with Virginia's side. Patrick didn't love these events. They always left him feeling like an outsider, looking through glass at a family that had decided long ago he didn't quite fit. But Martin loved spending time with his cousins, and that was enough. The boy deserved normalcy, laughter, the kind of childhood memories that stick. He pulled into the parking lot expecting chaos. Kids running between cars, parents calling out names, the usual control disaster that followed any gathering involving Judy Whitmore and her assembled clan. Instead, the lot was nearly empty. 3 cars remained, none of them Virginia sedan. The picnic area sat abandoned, paper plates tumbling across the grass in the hot breeze. Patrick's stomach tightened. He scanned the park once, then again. The swings hung motionless. The basketball court baked empty under the sun. And then he saw him. Martin sat on the curb near the far edge of the parking lot, small and alone, his red backpack clutched against his chest like it might protect him from the world. The boy's shoulders were hunched forward, his head down, and even from 30 yards away, Patrick could see he was crying. The truck door slammed harder than Patrick intended. His boots hit the pavement, and he was moving, his pulse loud in his ears, the heat forgotten. Everything narrowed to his son, 6 years old, abandoned, sitting in the sun without water or shade or any goddamn explanation. Martin, the boy's head snapped up. His face was blotchy and red, streaked with tears and dust. When he saw Patrick, something broke in his expression, relief and shame and fear all tangled together. He scrambled to his feet and ran. Patrick caught him, knelt down, pulled him close. Martin's small body trembled against his chest, hiccuping sobs he was trying hard to swallow. The fabric of his t-shirt was damp with sweat, his skin hot to the touch. "I've got you," Patrick said quietly, one hand cradling the back of Martin's head. "You're safe now. I'm here." Martin clung tighter, his fingers digging into Patrick's shoulders. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Patrick just held him, letting the boy cry it out, feeling the rapid thump of his son's heartbeat against his own chest. When the sobs finally eased, Patrick pulled back just enough to look at Martin's face. He brushed the hair off the boy's forehead, sticky with sweat. "What happened, buddy? Why are you out here alone?" Martin's lower lip quivered. He looked down, ashamed. I was being too loud. Too loud. At the party. Inside. Grandma Judy said I was ruining it for the other kids." The words came faster now, tumbling over each other. "She told me to come outside and wait until I could behave. She said she'd come get me when I calmed down, but..." His voice cracked. "But she didn't come back, Dad. Nobody came back." Something cold and sharp settled in Patrick's chest. Not rage, but something worse. Clarity. The kind that cuts through excuses and politeness and every carefully constructed justification he'd heard from Virginia's family for the past 7 years. Judy Whitmore had left his 6-year-old son alone in a parking lot, in 94-degree heat, for over an hour. "How long were you out here?" Martin shrugged, small and miserable. "I don't know. A long time. I tried to go back inside once, but Grandma Judy said..." He hesitated, fresh tears welling. "She said I needed to learn that actions have consequences." Patrick's jaw tightened. He made himself take a slow breath, forcing the fury down where Martin couldn't see it. This wasn't the moment for anger. This was the moment for safety. "Listen to me." He cupped Martin's face gently, making sure the boy met his eyes. You did nothing wrong. You hear me? Nothing. You're a kid. You're supposed to be loud and excited and full of energy. That's what kids do. But Grandma Judy was wrong. The words came out harder than Patrick intended. He softened his voice. Come on, let's get you home. He lifted Martin easily, settling him on one hip the way he used to when the boy was smaller. Martin wrapped his arms around Patrick's neck and buried his face against his shoulder. Patrick grabbed the backpack with his free hand and carried his son across the baking pavement to the truck. Inside the cab, he cranked the air conditioning to full blast and handed Martin the water bottle he kept in the cup holder. The boy drank greedily, some of it spilling down his chin. Better. Martin nodded, wiping his mouth. Patrick buckled him into the booster's seat, his hands steady despite the anger simmering just beneath his skin. He checked the straps twice, then climbed into the driver's seat. Before starting the engine, he turned to look at his son. You're safe now, okay? I've got you. Martin's red-rimmed eyes met his. Can we go home? Not yet. Patrick's voice was calm, controlled. First, I need to have a conversation with Grandma Judy. The community hall attached to the park buzzed with noise and light. Patrick could hear it from the parking lot. Children's laughter, adult voices talking over each other, the thud of a basketball being bounced indoors. Through the windows, he could see movement, people clustered around tables laden with food. He pushed through the double doors, Martin's hand tight in his own. The room was exactly what he'd expected. Streamers hung from the ceiling in bright primary colors. A fold-out table sagged under the weight of pizza boxes, juice pouches, and cupcakes decorated with too much frosting. Kids ran in circles, hopped up on sugar and freedom. Adults stood in small groups, nursing paper cups of lemonade and talking too loud. And there, in the center of it all like a queen holding court, stood Judy Whitmore. She was a tall woman, broad-shouldered and solid, with iron-gray hair cut in a severe bob. She wore khaki capris and a polo shirt with the country club logo embroidered on the breast. Her arms crossed as she laughed at something Virginia's cousin had said. Confident, certain, completely unbothered. The laughter died when she saw Patrick. Conversations stuttered to a halt. Kids stopped mid-run. The basketball bounced once, twice, then rolled to a stop against someone's foot. Patrick walked forward, Martin pressed against his side, the boy's tear-stained face visible to everyone in the room. Judy straightened, her expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. Patrick, you're late. You left my son alone outside in the sun for over an hour. The words came out quiet, measured, each one deliberate. Patrick didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence in the room did the work for him. Judy waved a dismissive hand, her mouth twisting in irritation. Oh, for heaven's sake, don't be so dramatic. He was being completely out of control, disturbing all the other children. I sent him outside to cool off and calm down. He's 6 years old. Exactly. Old enough to learn that his behavior has consequences. She looked down at Martin with something close to disdain. He ruins every single outing we plan. Every birthday party, every family gathering. He finds a way to make it about himself. Patrick felt Martin flinch against his leg. The boy tried to make himself smaller, shrinking under his grandmother's gaze. Something in Patrick's chest turned to steel. He stepped closer to Judy, his voice dropping even lower. You don't get to decide whether my son deserves basic safety. You don't get to leave him alone in a parking lot like he's a piece of luggage you forgot to pack. I was teaching him. You were punishing him for being a child. Judy's face flushed red. I have raised 4 children of my own, Patrick. I think I know a thing or two about discipline. Then you should know better than this. Across the room, Virginia finally looked up from the cupcake table where she'd been arranging desserts with her sister. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, her sundress pristine despite the chaos around her. She saw Patrick, saw Martin's blotchy face, and her expression flickered. Guilt, maybe, or just exhaustion. She walked over slowly, her footsteps careful, like she was approaching something fragile that might shatter. Patrick, what's going on? He turned to look at his wife. 7 years of marriage, and in that moment she felt like a stranger. Your mother left Martin alone outside. No water, no supervision. In this heat. Virginia glanced at her mother, then back at Patrick. Her voice came out tired, practiced, like she'd given this same speech 100 times before. Patrick, I'm sure Mom didn't mean anything by it. You always assume the worst. The words hit him harder than he expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they were automatic. Reflexive. Like she'd already decided whose side she was on before she even heard the story. Virginia. Mom was overwhelmed. The kids were running wild, and Martin was getting overstimulated. She probably just needed him to take a break. For over an hour, in 94-degree heat, Virginia's mouth tightened. She looked at her mother again, and Judy gave a small nod, subtle, but Patrick caught it. Permission. Encouragement. The silent language they perfected over decades of mother-daughter symbiosis. You're making a scene, Virginia said quietly. Everyone's looking. Patrick stared at her. His wife. The woman he'd married in a ceremony Judy had orchestrated down to the napkin colors. The woman whose first instinct, even now, was to defend her mother. Martin tugged on his hand. Dad, he whispered. Can we go home now? Patrick looked down at his son. The boy's eyes were red and swollen, his small face exhausted. Around them, the room watched in uncomfortable silence. Virginia stood with her arms crossed, protective of her mother. Judy's expression held something almost triumphant. He could argue. He could push this, demand acknowledgement, force Virginia to see what was right in front of her. Or he could protect his son. Patrick squeezed Martin's hand. Yeah, buddy, we can go. He turned and walked toward the door, his son's small footsteps pattering beside him. Behind him, he heard Virginia call his name once, uncertain, but he didn't stop. The heat slammed into them as they stepped outside. Patrick lifted Martin into the truck, buckled him in with gentle hands, and closed the door. For a moment, he just stood there in the parking lot, one hand pressed against the hot metal of the truck bed, breathing. Inside the community hall, through the windows, he could see the party resuming. Judy saying something that made people laugh. Virginia shaking her head, turning back to her cupcakes. Patrick climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. Dad, Martin's voice was small from the back. Am I bad? No. Patrick met his son's eyes in the rearview mirror. You're not bad. You're not too loud. You're not any of the things she said. Then why? Some people don't know how to love without control. Patrick put the truck in reverse. That's their problem, not yours. They drove home in silence, the air conditioning blasting cold against their skin, the radio turned off. Patrick's hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to make his knuckles white. He'd protected Martin today, gotten him out of that room, away from Judy's poison. But he knew this wasn't over. Not even close. That evening, after Martin fell asleep, curled up in his bed with his stuffed dinosaur clutched tight, Patrick stood in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. His hands moved on autopilot, rinsing plates, fitting them into the rack, mind elsewhere. He heard Virginia's car pull into the driveway around 8:30. The garage door openward. A door slammed. Footsteps through the mudroom. She came into the kitchen like a storm, purse dropped on the counter, keys jangling. Her cheeks were flushed, whether from anger or the heat outside. Patrick couldn't tell. I can't believe you embarrassed my mother like that. Patrick didn't turn around. He placed another plate in the dishwasher, methodical and calm. She abandoned our kid, Virginia. She didn't abandon him. God, you exaggerate everything. Virginia yanked open the refrigerator, grabbed a bottle of wine, poured herself a glass without offering him any. Mom was overwhelmed. There were 15 kids at that party, and Martin was bouncing off the walls. She needed him to settle down. So she left him in a parking lot. She sent him outside for a timeout. For over an hour, Patrick turned to face her now, in the heat, with no water. Virginia took a long drink of wine. You're making it sound worse than it was. How should I make it sound? Like what it actually was, a grandmother trying to manage an out-of-control child using the only method she knows. The words hung between them, sharp and cutting. Patrick studied his wife's face, looking for some crack in her certainty, some hint that she understood what she was defending. But Virginia's jaw was set, her eyes hard. He's 6 years old, Patrick said quietly. He got excited at a party. That doesn't deserve punishment. It deserves boundaries. Something you refuse to give him. Boundaries? Is that what we're calling this? Virginia slammed her wine glass down, red liquid sloshing over the rim. Yes, Patrick. Boundaries. Structure. Discipline. Things Mom knows about because she actually raised children successfully, unlike you in your laissez-faire approach to parenting where Martin can do whatever he wants whenever he wants. Patrick felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't about today. This was deeper, older, years of Judy's whispers taking root, growing wild. Your mother is destroying our family, he said. The words came out calm, factual. And you're letting her. Virginia's face went white, then red. How dare you? It's the truth. My mother has done nothing but support us since the day we got married. She babysits Martin. She helps with money when we're short. She throws him birthday parties and takes him to the zoo and uses all of it as leverage. Patrick stepped closer. Every time I disagree with her, every time I suggest we do things differently, she reminds you of all she's done. Makes you feel guilty. Makes you choose. That's not. When was the last time you disagreed with her about anything, Virginia? When was the last time you made a decision about Martin without calling her first? His wife's mouth open, closed. She looked away, grabbing her wine glass again. That's what I thought, Patrick said softly. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. Virginia turned on him, eyes bright with unshed tears and fury. If you keep attacking my mother, you will ruin this marriage. Do you understand me? You will destroy everything we've built. Patrick stared at her, his wife, the woman he'd loved enough to promise forever. And in that moment, looking at her flushed face and defensive posture and the way she stood like a wall between him and any criticism of Judy, he realized something important. The marriage was already on the edge. It had been for years. And Judy Whitmore was the one pushing it. I won't apologize for protecting our son, he said. Virginia's laugh was bitter. Protecting him? You're alienating him from his entire extended family. You're teaching him that his grandmother is some kind of monster. I'm teaching him that he deserves to be treated with respect. No. Virginia set down her glass with finality. You're teaching him that your way is the only right way, and anyone who disagrees with you is wrong. You're making him, just like you, rigid, unforgiving, impossible to please. The accusation stung because it was designed to. Judy's words coming out of Virginia's mouth, polished and sharp. Patrick took a breath. I'm going to check on Martin. Of course you are. Virginia's voice dripped sarcasm. Run away from the conversation like you always do. He stopped at the kitchen doorway, looked back at his wife. She stood in the harsh fluorescent light, arms crossed, face hard, defending her mother. Choosing sides. I'm not running, Patrick said quietly. I'm choosing our son. I wish you would too. He walked upstairs before she could respond. Martin's room was dark, except for the night light shaped like a crescent moon. The boy slept on his stomach, one arm flung over his dinosaur, mouth slightly open. Peaceful. Patrick sat on the edge of the bed, rested his hand gently on Martin's back, rose and fell with each breath. Downstairs, he heard Virginia moving through the house, closing cabinets, running water, the sounds of someone occupying space alone. He thought marriage was supposed to be a partnership, two people against the world, building something together. But somewhere along the way, maybe from the beginning, it had become three people, and the third one was winning. Patrick stayed with Martin until his own breathing matched his son's, slow and steady. When he finally went to bed, Virginia was already asleep, or pretending to be, turned away from his side with the blanket pulled up to her ears. He lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling, listening to the air conditioning hum. Tomorrow, he knew, this would get worse. Judy Whitmore didn't forgive easily, and she never forgot. The morning after the parking lot incident, Patrick woke to find Virginia's side of the bed empty. He could hear her voice downstairs, low and urgent, and didn't need to check the caller ID to know who she was talking to. He showered, dressed, and went down to make Martin breakfast. The boy sat at the kitchen table drawing with crayons, his face still puffy from yesterday's tears. Virginia stood by the window, with her phone pressed to her ear, murmuring agreement to whatever Judy was saying on the other end. I know him. I told him that. He won't listen. Patrick cracked eggs into a pan, the sizzle loud in the quiet kitchen. Martin glanced up at him, worried, then back down at his drawing. A house with stick figures. Mom, Dad, and a small boy in the middle. Virginia ended the call and turned around, her expression guarded. Mom's upset. Patrick flipped the eggs without looking at her. I imagine she is. She thinks you owe her an apology. For what? Protecting Martin? For embarrassing her in front of the entire family. Virginia's voice rose slightly. For making a scene. For treating her like she's some kind of child abuser when all she was doing was trying to help manage a difficult situation. Patrick plated the eggs and set them in front of Martin. Eat, buddy. Patrick, I'm talking to you. He finally looked at his wife. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept well either. And I'm listening. But my answer hasn't changed. I'm not apologizing for keeping Martin safe. You're impossible. Virginia grabbed her purse. I'm going to Mom's. Of course you are. She stopped at the door, hand on the knob. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Patrick poured himself coffee. Give Judy my regards. Virginia left without another word. The front door closed with controlled precision. Not quite a slam, but close enough. Martin pushed eggs around his plate. Is Mommy mad at me? No, buddy. Mommy's not mad at you. Then why? Grown-up stuff. Don't worry about it. But Martin did worry. Patrick could see it in the way the boy's shoulders hunched, the way he kept glancing toward the door like he expected Virginia to come back. At 6 years old, he couldn't understand the complexity of adult conflict, but he could feel its weight. Patrick sat down across from him. Hey, look at me. Martin raised his eyes, uncertain. Whatever happens between Mommy and me, it's not your fault. You understand? None of this is about you. Grandma Judy said. I don't care what Grandma Judy said. Patrick kept his voice gentle but firm. You're a good kid. You're loved. And nothing that's happening is because of anything you did. Martin nodded slowly, not entirely convinced, but trying to believe it. They spent the rest of the morning together, building with blocks, watching cartoons, pretending everything was normal. But Patrick's phone buzzed repeatedly with text from Virginia. Mom wants to talk to you. She's crying. You really hurt her. Can you please just call and apologize? You're tearing this family apart. He didn't respond. Responding would only feed the cycle. Judy demanding appeasement. Virginia playing messenger. Patrick expected a bend until he broke. Around noon, when Martin was absorbed in coloring, Patrick finally replied, I'm not apologizing. What she did was wrong. Virginia's response came immediately. Fine. Then she's coming over. Patrick's jaw tightened. Tell her not to. She's already on her way. He looked out the front window. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, Judy's silver SUV pulled into the driveway. Virginia's sedan right behind it. Patrick stood, squared his shoulders. Martin, go play in your room for a bit. Why? Because I need you to. The boy recognized that tone, not angry but absolute. He gathered his crayons and paper and trudged upstairs, casting worried glances back. Patrick waited in the living room. The front door opened without a knock. Judy had never believed in asking permission to enter her daughter's house, and both women walked in like they owned the place. Judy looked exactly as she had yesterday. Pressed khakis, polo shirt, hair severe. But her eyes held something harder now. Calculation. Purpose. She stopped in the center of the room and pointed one finger at Patrick. You are unstable. Patrick almost laughed. Of all the opening salvos, he hadn't expected that one. Excuse me. You heard me. Unstable. Volatile. Unfit. Judy's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The way you stormed into that party yesterday, the way you manhandled Martin in front of everyone, the way you spoke to me, it's clear you have anger management issues. I didn't manhandle anyone. You grabbed him and dragged him out of there like a caveman. Patrick kept his voice level. I carried my crying son out of a situation where he'd been abandoned and punished for being 6 years old. That's called parenting. Judy sniffed. That's called making a scene. Martin doesn't need a father who flies off the handle at every perceived slight. And he doesn't need a grandmother who treats him like he's broken. I treat him with appropriate discipline. Something you clearly don't understand. Virginia stepped forward, positioning herself slightly between them. Patrick, please. Mom came here to talk, not to fight. Could have fooled me. Judy ignored the comment. She crossed her arms and studied Patrick like he was an interesting specimen under glass. Martin is a sensitive child who needs structure and consequences. Your permissive parenting style is doing him no favors. If you can't provide that structure, then perhaps, she paused deliberately, perhaps Virginia should reconsider whether this marriage is in Martin's best interest. The room went very quiet. Patrick looked at Virginia, waiting for her to object, to defend their marriage, to tell her mother she'd crossed a line. Virginia looked at the floor. There it is, Patrick said softly. The real reason you came. Judy lifted her chin. I'm only thinking of my daughter and grandson. No, you're thinking about control. Patrick stepped closer, and Judy actually took a half step back. You've been trying to end this marriage since before it started. Every holiday argument, every parenting disagreement, every time Virginia second-guesses herself. That's you, whispering in her ear that she could do better. That's absurd. Is it? When was the last time Virginia made a major decision without calling you first? When was the last time she chose me over you? Judy's face flushed. I have sacrificed everything for my daughter. I raised her right, taught her values, gave her every opportunity. And then she married you, someone with no family money, no connections, no real prospects. I've been cleaning up your messes ever since. What messes? The bills you can't pay, the jobs you can't keep, the responsibilities you can't handle. Patrick's hands clenched at his sides. Every accusation was either exaggerated or invented outright, but they were perfectly crafted to wound. Virginia, are you going to let her say this? His wife finally looked up. Her face was pale, conflicted. Patrick, you have to admit you and Mom don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. That's not what I asked. Maybe, Virginia's voice wavered. Maybe we all need some space to think. Judy smiled, just a flicker, quickly hidden, but Patrick caught it. Space, he repeated flatly, just for a little while, until everyone calms down. I am calm. You don't seem calm. Patrick looked between them, his wife and his mother-in-law standing shoulder to shoulder, a united front he'd never been invited to join. 7 years of trying to be good enough, trying to fit into a family that had decided on day one he didn't belong. He was done trying. Get out, he said quietly. Judy's eyebrows rose. I beg your pardon? This is my house. Get out. It's Virginia's house, too. Then Virginia can stay. You leave. Judy looked at her daughter expectantly. Virginia hesitated, torn, her eyes darting between her mother and her husband. The silence stretched, painful and infinite. Finally, she spoke. Patrick, that's not fair. What's not fair is you bringing her here to attack me in my own home. She's my mother, and I'm your husband. Doesn't that count for anything? Virginia's eyes filled with tears. Why are you making me choose? I'm not. She is. Patrick pointed at Judy. She's been making you choose since we met, and you keep picking her. That's not true, isn't it? Judy put a hand on Virginia's shoulder, protective and possessive. Come on, sweetheart. We don't need to stay here and be abused. Abused? Patrick's voice finally rose. Are you serious? Keep your voice down, Virginia hissed. Martin will hear. Good. Maybe he should hear that his grandmother thinks his father is unstable and his parents' marriage is a mistake. Judy's face hardened into something cold and sharp. You're proving my point right now. This temper, this volatility, it's exactly what I'm talking about. Martin deserves better. Virginia deserves better. And you're going to give it to them? By destroying their family. I'm protecting my family. I'm her family too. The shout echoed through the house. Upstairs, Patrick heard Martin's door open, small footsteps in the hallway. Virginia moved toward the stairs, but Patrick held up a hand. I'll get him. No, I said I'll get him. He took the stairs 2 at a time, found Martin standing in the hallway with his dinosaur clutched in both hands, eyes wide and frightened. Back in your room, buddy. Are you and Mommy fighting? The grown-ups are having a disagreement. That's all. Is it because of me? Patrick's heart cracked. He knelt down, pulled Martin into a hug. No, never because of you. I promise. He got Martin settled back in his room with a cartoon on the tablet, then returned downstairs. Judy and Virginia stood by the door, coats already on, purse in hand. We're leaving, Virginia announced, her voice stiff and formal. I think it's best if I stay at Mom's for a few days. Give us both time to cool off. Virginia, don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. Judy opened the door, gestured for Virginia to go first. Before following, she turned back to Patrick with a look of absolute certainty. You've been rethinking this marriage for Virginia since the day you met her, Patrick said quietly. But she's the one who has to make that choice, not you. Judy's smile was thin and dangerous. We'll see. They left. Patrick stood in the empty living room, listening to their cars pull out of the driveway. The house felt hollow, too quiet except for the muffled sounds of Martin's cartoon upstairs. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. This was just the beginning. He could feel it. The machinery Judy was setting in motion, the careful campaign to separate him from his family. And the worst part was Virginia was helping her do it. 2 days passed. Virginia didn't come home. She texted occasionally, brief, impersonal updates about when she'd pick up more clothes, whether Martin had his soccer cleats, reminders about upcoming bills. Nothing about the fight. Nothing about them. Patrick kept Martin's routine normal. Breakfast, playtime, lunch, quiet time, dinner, bath, bed. The boy asked about Virginia every few hours. When's mommy coming home? I don't know, buddy. Did I make her mad? No, this isn't about you. But Martin didn't believe it. 6-year-olds always think they're the center of every storm. On the third day, a woman knocked on the door at 10 in the morning. She was young, maybe late 20s, with a county ID badge clipped to her belt and a folder under one arm. Mr. Monroe? Yes. I'm Jessica Kim, with Child Protective Services. May I come in? Patrick's stomach dropped. What's this about? We received a report concerning your son, Martin. I just need to ask you a few questions. He stood frozen in the doorway, mind racing. Who filed the report? I can't disclose that information. May I come in? Patrick stepped aside, numb. This couldn't be happening. Not this fast. Not this calculated. But he knew exactly who'd made the call. Jessica sat on the couch, opened her folder. Patrick remained standing, arms crossed, trying to project calm authority while his pulse hammered. Mr. Monroe, the report alleges that you frequently shout at Martin and have created an unsafe environment in the home. Can you speak to that? That's not true. You never raise your voice? I'm a parent. Sometimes I speak firmly, but I don't shout at my son, and I certainly haven't created an unsafe environment. Jessica made notes. The report also mentions a recent incident at a family gathering where you became aggressive and removed Martin from the premises against his will. Patrick almost laughed. The manipulation was impressive in its audacity. That's a creative interpretation of events. Can you explain what happened? He walked her through it. Finding Martin abandoned in the parking lot, the confrontation with Judy, Virginia's response. Jessica listened without interrupting, her expression neutral and professional. And you and your wife are currently separated? Temporarily. She's staying with her mother. Is that related to the incident at the party? Yes. More notes. Jessica asked about his relationship with Martin, their daily routine, whether Patrick had ever physically disciplined the boy. All questions Patrick answered honestly, clearly, without defensiveness. Finally, she closed the folder. Would it be possible for me to speak with Martin? Of course. Patrick brought his son downstairs. Martin sat next to him on the couch, shy and uncertain around the stranger. Jessica asked simple questions. Did he like living here? Did he feel safe? Did Daddy ever scare him? Martin shook his head to the last one. Daddy's nice, the boy said quietly. He takes care of me. After 20 minutes, Jessica stood. Thank you both for your time. I'll be submitting my report to the department. And Patrick's voice was carefully controlled. I don't see any evidence of abuse or neglect, Mr. Monroe. I'll note that in my findings. She paused at the door. But I would recommend you and your wife work on your communication. Family conflict can be hard on children, even when they're not the direct cause. I'm aware. After she left, Patrick sent Martin to play and immediately called Virginia. She answered on the third ring. Hello. Did you know about this? Silence. Then quietly, about what? Don't play games with me, Virginia. Someone called CPS. They just left my house. More silence. Patrick could hear voices in the background. Judy's voice, sharp and questioning. Virginia, did you file a report claiming I was abusive to Martin? She hesitated. Mom said we should protect Martin any way we can. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. He sat down hard, the phone pressed to his ear, unable to speak. Patrick? Virginia's voice wavered. Are you there? You think I'm a danger to my own son. I didn't say that. You filed a report with Child Protective Services. What else does that mean? Mom said, that's the problem. Patrick's voice finally rose. Everything is what your mom says. She says I'm unstable, so I'm unstable. She says I'm dangerous, so you file a report. When do you get to have your own opinion, Virginia? When do you get to think for yourself? That's not fair. It's completely fair. Your mother is puppeteering this entire situation, and you're letting her. In the background, Judy's voice grew louder. He heard her say, give me the phone. No, Mom, give it to me. There was a rustling sound. Then Judy's voice came through sharp and clear. She's done talking to you, Patrick. Put my wife back on. Your wife is finally seeing sense. If you had any decency, you'd make this easy on everyone and just walk away. For my son? Never. Then we'll do this the hard way. Judy's tone promised warfare. But just so we're clear, you're going to lose. The line went dead. Patrick sat in the silence of his living room, phone still in his hand, the full weight of what was happening settling over him like a shroud. Judy Whitmore hadn't just declared war. She'd already fired the first shot, and she'd armed herself with his own wife. A week later, Virginia came to the house while Martin was at school. Patrick had been expecting this, the formal conversation, the carefully rehearsed speech. He'd prepared himself for it, built walls around the soft parts that might still hope for reconciliation. She walked in tentatively, like she was entering a stranger's home, sat on the edge of the couch without taking off her coat. I'm filing for separation, she said without preamble. Patrick nodded. He'd already guessed as much. Temporary or permanent. I don't know yet. I just know I need space. From me, or from making a decision. Virginia flinched. That's not fair. A lot of things aren't fair, Virginia. But I've stopped expecting fairness from this situation. She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. Mom thinks. Please don't. Patrick's voice was weary. Don't tell me what Judy thinks. For once, tell me what you think. His wife's eyes filled with tears. I think I'm tired. I think every day is a battle between you and my mother, and I'm stuck in the middle, and I don't know how to fix it. You could choose your marriage. I could choose you mean. Is there a difference? Yes. Virginia wiped her eyes. Because choosing you means rejecting her. And I can't do that, Patrick. She's my mother. She's been there my whole life. You've been there 7 years. The calculation was brutal in its honesty. 7 years of marriage weighed against 34 years of mother-daughter conditioning, and Patrick had lost before he ever had a chance to compete. So that's it, he said quietly. She wins. This isn't about winning. It absolutely is. That's all it's ever been about for Judy. Winning, controlling, making sure Virginia stays exactly where she wants her. Stop it. Virginia stood, agitated. You make her sound like a monster. I make her sound like what she is. No, you make her sound like your enemy because she doesn't agree with everything you say and do. God forbid anyone question the almighty Patrick Monroe. The attack came from nowhere, and Patrick realized with sudden clarity that these weren't Virginia's words. This was Judy's script, handed down and memorized, delivered with Virginia's voice, but shaped by someone else's venom. He stood too, faced his wife across the small distance of their living room. I've never needed everyone to agree with me, Virginia. I've needed my wife to be on my side. Just once. Just when it mattered most. I'm on your side. No, you're on her side. You always have been. Virginia's face crumpled. I'm trying to keep everyone happy. You can't. That's not how this works. Eventually, you have to choose what's right over what's easy. And what's right? You? Walking away from my family. What's right is protecting our son from a woman who abandoned him in a parking lot. What's right is building a marriage that doesn't require a third-party mediator for every decision. What's right is being a partner, Virginia. Not her extension. She grabbed her purse, hands shaking. I came here to have a civil conversation about logistics. About custody schedules and finances, and you're leaving before it gets too hard. Like always. That's not. It is. Every time we get close to the real issue, you run to Judy and let her tell you what to feel. Virginia turned for the door, then stopped. Turned back. For a moment, just a flash, Patrick saw something in her eyes that looked like regret, or maybe recognition. She said you'd say that, Virginia whispered. Of course she did. She's written the whole script. You're just performing it. The regret vanished, replaced by something harder. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. I haven't hired a lawyer. Well, you should. Mom says this could get complicated. Patrick almost admired Judy's thoroughness. Plant the idea. Escalate the conflict. Make sure there's no path back to reconciliation. Tell your mother, he said carefully, that she can try whatever she wants. But Martin stays with me. That's not negotiable. We'll see what the court says. Yes, we will. Virginia left, and Patrick stood in the empty house listening to her car pull away. Through the window, he could see their neighbor, old Mr. Peterson, watering his roses, pretending not to notice the drama unfolding next door. Patrick's phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Judy's attorney. Please have your counsel contact our office to discuss the separation agreement. Time is of the essence. Time is of the essence. The legal version of hurry up and surrender. Patrick deleted the text and made his own call. To a lawyer his buddy from work had recommended. A woman who specialized in fathers' rights and contentious divorces. If Judy wanted war, he'd give her one. But he'd fight smart, not loud. And he'd fight for the only thing that really mattered. The small boy who trusted him to keep him safe. Patrick would burn down his own life before he let Judy Whitmore win. 3 months felt both endless and impossibly fast. Patrick moved through them in a haze of paperwork and preparation. Every day, a calculated step in a dance he'd never wanted to learn. Virginia made it official. Filed for full divorce. Hired Judy's high-power attorney friend who specialized in, as the website proclaimed, protecting mothers and children from unsafe situations. The irony wasn't lost on Patrick. The woman who'd abandoned Martin was now claiming to protect him. The demands came in a thick packet of legal documents that Patrick read 3 times before he fully believed what he was seeing. Primary physical custody to Virginia. Child support calculated at nearly 40% of his income. Supervised visitation for Patrick, pending anger management assessment. Full decision-making authority for Virginia regarding Martin's education, health care, and extracurricular activities. Every line carried Judy's fingerprints. Every accusation echoed her words from that day in his living room. Unstable, volatile, unsafe. Patrick's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel Brennan with steel-gray hair and a reputation for never backing down, read through it once and looked up at him with something close to fury. This is character assassination dressed up as legal filings. Can they do this? They could try. Doesn't mean they'll succeed. Rachel tapped the papers with one manicured nail. Everything in here is innuendo and allegations without evidence. Your wife, ex-wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, is claiming you have a temper. But where's the proof? No police reports. No witnesses. Nothing but her mother's word and her own sudden memory of events that apparently didn't bother her for 7 years of marriage. Patrick leaned back in the chair, exhaustion settling into his bones. So what do? We document everything. Every interaction, every conversation, every exchange. You keep calm, professional, and above reproach. They want to paint you as dangerous? We show the court you're the most stable, reliable parent Martin has. And the supervised visits. Rachel's mouth tightened. We fight it. But Patrick, I need to prepare you. Family court tends to favor mothers. That's changing slowly, but judges still carry unconscious bias. If Virginia shows up looking sympathetic with her attorney talking about protecting her son from an angry father, some judges might buy it long enough to grant temporary restrictions. I've never hurt Martin. I know, and we'll prove that. But we need ammunition of our own. Patrick spent the next weeks living under a microscope of his own design. He documented every text message Virginia sent, every phone call, every time she changed the pickup schedule or canceled his time with Martin. He kept a journal, boring, methodical, detailed, recording Martin's mood when he picked him up versus when he dropped him off. Happy when they were together. Withdrawn and anxious when he returned to Virginia's. He never said anything negative about Virginia to Martin. Never tried to turn the boy against his mother. But he paid attention to the things Martin said unprompted. Grandma Judy says you might not be my dad anymore. Grandma Judy says Mommy was brave to leave you. Grandma Judy says, always Judy. Her poison dripping into his son's ears, reshaping reality, making Patrick the villain in a story she was writing in real time. The mediation was worse than Patrick expected. They sat in a conference room with neutral beige walls and uncomfortable chairs, a mediator at the head of the table trying her best to keep things civil. Virginia showed up with her attorney, a man in his 50s with 2 white teeth and a practiced expression of concern. Judy sat beside them, uninvited and unwelcome, but no one made her leave. Patrick had Rachel. That was enough. The attorney started. My client has serious concerns about Mr. Monroe's mental stability and his ability to parent effectively during stressful situations. Rachel didn't blink. Based on what evidence? Based on multiple incidents of volatile behavior, verbal aggression, and an unwillingness to cooperate with reasonable parenting boundaries. Examples. The attorney shuffled papers. The incident at the family party where Mr. Monroe confronted Mrs. Monroe's mother publicly and removed the child from a safe environment. You mean when he found his 6-year-old son abandoned in a parking lot in 90-degree heat? Rachel's voice stayed level, almost bored. That incident, it was a supervised timeout. Mrs. Whitmore was checking on him regularly. For over an hour? Without water? That's not supervision. That's neglect. The attorney's smile tightened. That's one interpretation. It's the factual interpretation. The mediation deteriorated from there. Back and forth, claim and counterclaim. Each side reading from scripts that never quite connected. Virginia said nothing, just sat with her hands folded, occasionally glancing at her mother for approval. Patrick watched her and felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, just a vast, empty recognition that the woman he'd married no longer existed. Or maybe she never had. Maybe this version, uncertain and controlled, had always been there underneath, and he'd just chosen not to see it. 2 hours of circular arguments produced nothing. The mediator suggested they reconvene in 2 weeks. As they filed out, Judy cornered Patrick in the hallway. Virginia and her attorney had already left, but Judy lingered, predatory and patient. You can't win this, she said quietly. Patrick kept walking. She followed. I've been through 3 divorces, my own, both my sisters, my best friends. I know how this ends. The mother always gets custody. Always. Especially when the father is... She let the word hang, unfinished but clear. Patrick stopped, turned to face her. Is what? Difficult. Aggressive. Unable to control his temper. I've never been any of those things. That's not what Virginia will tell the judge. Virginia will lie under oath? Judy smiled. Virginia will tell her truth. The one I've helped her remember. All those times you raised your voice. All those times you made her feel small and afraid. All those times you chose your own ego over your family. None of that happened. It doesn't matter what happened. It matters what she believes happened. Judy stepped closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. I've spent 3 months working with her, helping her process her trauma, helping her see how your psychological manipulation affected her ability to see clearly. By the time we get to court, she'll believe every word. Patrick's hands clenched at his sides. He forced them to relax, forced his voice to stay calm. You're creating false memories. I'm helping her access suppressed ones. There's a difference. No, there's really not. Judy's expression hardened. Sign the agreement, Patrick. Give Virginia custody. Accept supervised visitation. Walk away with some dignity intact. Because if you fight this, I will destroy you. I will take every moment of your marriage and twist it until you look like a monster. I will coach Virginia through testimony that will break your heart. And I will stand up in that courtroom and tell the judge exactly what kind of danger you pose to my grandson. Martin is my son. Not for much longer. She walked away, heels clicking on the tile floor, leaving Patrick standing alone in the hallway with his pulse pounding and his lawyer's voice echoing in his head. Stay calm. Stay professional. Document everything. He pulled out his phone and opened a voice memo app. Played back the recording he'd started before the mediation ended. Judy's voice, clear and unmistakable. I've spent 3 months working with her, helping her process her trauma, helping her see how your psychological manipulation affected her ability to see clearly. By the time we get to court, she'll believe every word. Not admissible in court, maybe, but leverage nonetheless. Patrick saved the file, backed it up to 3 separate places, and walked to his truck. If Judy wanted to fight dirty, he'd fight smarter. The break came from an unexpected place. Patrick was loading groceries into his truck outside a Safeway when an older woman approached him. She was small, maybe 70, with white hair cut short and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Excuse me, are you Patrick Monroe?" He tensed automatically. "Who's asking?" "My name is Geneva Hartley. I live next door to Judy Whitmore." She glanced around the parking lot nervously. "I've been hoping to run into you. Is there somewhere we could talk?" They sat in a coffee shop 2 blocks away. Geneva ordered tea and wrapped both hands around the mug like she needed its warmth despite the Arizona heat outside. "I don't usually get involved in other people's business," she began. "I'm a firm believer in minding my own concerns. But what I've heard, it's not right." Patrick waited, not daring to interrupt. "Judy and I have book club together every Thursday evening. 6 of us women, we meet at different houses, talk about the book for maybe 20 minutes, then gossip for 2 hours. Geneva smiled apologetically. "I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth." "Okay." 3 months ago, right after your separation, Judy started talking. About you. About her daughter. About a plan she had to ensure Virginia got full custody. Patrick leaned forward. Geneva pulled a small notebook from her purse. "I wrote it all down. Dates, times, everything she said. I didn't think it was right, what she was planning." And when she started bragging, the older woman's face tightened with distaste. "That's when I knew I had to do something." She slid the notebook across the table. Patrick opened it with shaking hands. Page after page of neat handwriting, dated and detailed. September 15th. Judy said she's coaching Virginia on what to say to make Patrick look unstable. Men like him need to be taught they can't control everything. September 22nd. Judy laughed about the CPS report. "It won't amount to anything, but it starts a paper trail. Documentation is everything in custody battles." October 3rd. Judy told us she's found a therapist who will testify about Virginia's emotional trauma from marriage. The therapist hasn't met Virginia yet. Judy called it building a narrative. October 17th. Book club at Judy's house. "She drank too much wine and got louder," said Patrick. "Needs to be destroyed completely so he can't poison Martin against Virginia." Said she's been documenting every interaction to submit to the court. The entries went on. Page after page of calculated manipulation, manufactured evidence, and systematic character assassination. All in Judy's own words, witnessed by 6 women who'd sat in her living room drinking wine and eating cheese. Patrick looked up, hardly able to breathe. "Why are you giving this to me?" Geneva's eyes were sad. "Because I have 3 sons. And if someone had tried to do to any of them what Judy's doing to you, I would have wanted someone to stand up and tell the truth." She paused. "Also, I asked the other women in book club if they'd be willing to provide statements. 4 of them said yes." "You did that for me? A stranger?" "I did it for your son. He deserves a father who fights for him. And he deserves the truth to be heard." Geneva stood, gathering her purse. "My number's on the first page. Have your attorney call me. I'll testify if needed." She left before Patrick could properly thank her. He sat alone in the coffee shop, Geneva's notebook in his hands, and for the first time in 3 months felt something like hope. Judy had been so confident in her power, so certain her manipulation would remain hidden behind closed doors and careful witnesses. She'd never imagined someone from her own circle would turn against her. Patrick called Rachel immediately. "We got her," he said. The courtroom was smaller than Patrick expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, Arizona state seal behind the judge's bench. Rows of empty chairs except for the few people this would affect. Virginia and her attorney, Judy sitting ramrod straight in the gallery, Patrick and Rachel at their table. No jury. Just Judge Kathleen Morrison, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for theatrics. Virginia's attorney went first. Smooth, practiced, sympathetic. Painted a picture of a troubled marriage, a volatile husband, a mother trying to protect her child from an unstable environment. He called Virginia to the stand. She looked small sitting there, hands folded in her lap, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Patrick had anger issues. Yes, she'd often felt afraid. Yes, she worried about Martin's safety when he was alone with his father. Patrick watched his wife lie under oath and felt nothing but pity. She believed it. That was the worst part. Judy had done her job so thoroughly that Virginia's false testimony felt true even to her. Rachel cross-examined gently, almost kindly. Mrs. Monroe, did your husband ever hit you? No. Did he ever hit Martin? No. Did he ever threaten violence? Not directly. What does that mean? Virginia struggled. He would get angry, raise his voice, make me feel scared. Can you give a specific example? Silence. Virginia looked at her attorney, at her mother, back at Rachel. There were so many. Just one. The most recent one you remember clearly. More silence. Virginia's face crumpled slightly. I can't think of. It was more a pattern than specific incidents. Rachel nodded sympathetically. So you don't have a concrete example of your husband behaving violently or threateningly? The way he looked at me sometimes. Mrs. Monroe, impressions aren't facts. I'm asking for specific behavior. He embarrassed my mother at the family party. By removing your son from an unsafe situation? It wasn't unsafe. Mom was. Your mother left a 6-year-old alone in a parking lot for over an hour in 94-degree heat. That's the definition of unsafe. Virginia's attorney objected. Judge Morrison sustained it, but Patrick could see the judge's expression shift, just slightly, but enough. Rachel continued. Mrs. Monroe, has your mother influenced your testimony here today? No. She hasn't coached you on what to say. We've discussed the situation. Has she suggested specific phrases or descriptions for your husband's behavior? Virginia hesitated too long. She's helped me process my feelings. Rachel let that sit, then moved on. She called Geneva Hartley to the stand. The older woman took the oath and settled into the chair with calm dignity. She identified herself, confirmed her relationship with Judy, and explained about book club. Then Rachel handed her the notebook. Mrs. Hartley, can you explain what this is? It's a record I kept of statements Judy Whitmore made during our weekly book club meetings regarding her plans to obtain custody of her grandson by damaging Patrick Monroe's reputation and credibility. Virginia's attorney shot to his feet. Objection. Hearsay. Judge Morrison looked interested. I'll allow it for now. Continue, Mrs. Hartley. Geneva read from her notes. Calm, clear, devastating. Quote after quote of Judy's bragging, her plans, her manipulation of Virginia and the legal system. Judy's face went from pink to red to white. Virginia's attorney tried to discredit Geneva, suggested she had ulterior motives, questioned her memory, implied bias. But the notebook was dated, detailed, and corroborated by 4 other women who'd submitted written statements. Rachel then submitted text messages. Screenshots from Virginia's phone that Patrick's attorney had subpoenaed showing Judy's constant pressure. File the report. We need documentation. Say he scares you. Don't exaggerate, but don't minimize either. If you love Martin, you'll do what's necessary. The attorney says we need more evidence of his temper. Think back to any time he raised his voice. The judge read them in silence, her expression growing colder with each exchange. Finally, Rachel addressed the court. Your Honor, the evidence shows a clear pattern of manipulation and manufactured claims. Mr. Monroe is not a perfect man, but he's a good father who was abandoned by his wife at the behest of a controlling mother-in-law. Every allegation against him has been either exaggerated or invented entirely. Meanwhile, the woman pushing these allegations is the same person who left a 6-year-old child alone in a parking lot as punishment. She let that sink in. We request shared custody, no supervision requirement, and a stipulation that Judy Whitmore have no unsupervised access to Martin Monroe until such time as Mr. Monroe approves. Virginia's attorney tried to recover. called Judy to the stand to explain herself. Bad move. Judy was combative, defensive, unable to hide her contempt for Patrick or her belief that she'd done nothing wrong. She tried to frame everything as a mother protecting her daughter, but Judge Morrison wasn't buying it. Mrs. Whitmore, did you or did you not make statements to your book club about manufacturing evidence against Mr. Monroe? I may have vented frustrations, but yes or no? Judy's jaw clenched. We discussed strategy. Strategy to deprive a father of custody based on false allegations? They're not false. He's unstable. Based on what objective evidence? Judy had none. Just opinions, interpretations, her own certainty that she knew best. Judge Morrison called a 15-minute recess. When she returned, her verdict was swift. I've reviewed all evidence and testimony presented today. It's clear to me that we have a situation where a grandmother has inappropriately inserted herself into a custody dispute and actively worked to alienate a father from his child using manipulated testimony and manufactured evidence. She looked directly at Judy. Mrs. Whitmore, your behavior has been unconscionable. You have attempted to abuse the legal system to serve your own desire for control. Then to Virginia. Mrs. Monroe, I strongly suggest you examine the influence your mother has had on your perceptions and decisions. The evidence suggests you've been led to believe things about your husband that are simply not supported by facts. Finally, to Patrick. Mr. Monroe, you have demonstrated remarkable restraint and appropriate behavior throughout these proceedings. While your marriage may be ending, your relationship with your son is not. She issued her ruling. Joint legal and physical custody, 50-50 split. No supervised visits required. Judy Whitmore barred from unsupervised contact with Martin Monroe without Patrick Monroe's explicit written consent. Virginia Monroe ordered to attend family counseling to address enmeshment issues with her mother. Judy stood, face purple with rage. This is outrageous. I demand. You demand nothing in this courtroom, Mrs. Whitmore. Sit down or be held in contempt. Judy sat. Patrick felt Rachel's hand on his arm, squeezing gently. They'd won. Not perfectly. He'd lost his marriage, lost the family he'd tried to build, but he protected what mattered most. Martin would be safe. Would split time between homes, yes, but would know his father fought for him. Would be protected from Judy's manipulation. It wasn't everything, but it was justice. The weeks after the hearing moved with strange slowness. Patrick and Virginia exchanged Martin according to the court's schedule. Mondays and Tuesdays with Patrick, Wednesdays and Thursdays with Virginia, alternating weekends. They communicated through a co-parenting app that Rachel had recommended, every message time-stamped and documented. Virginia never spoke to him directly anymore. Just terse notifications through the app, running 10 minutes late for pickup. Martin needs new shoes. Doctor appointment scheduled for next week. Judy's name never appeared. According to the custody order, she wasn't allowed within 100 feet of Martin without Patrick's written permission. Virginia had apparently moved out of her mother's house into an apartment across town, putting physical distance between them for the first time in her life. Patrick didn't know if that was court-ordered therapy working or just pragmatic compliance. He didn't ask. Martin adjusted better than Patrick expected. The boy was resilient, rolling with the changes the way kids do when adults give them stable ground to stand on. He had his room at Patrick's house, his routine, his sense that Dad's place was safe. 3 weeks after the court date, Virginia appeared at the elementary school during afternoon pickup. Patrick was buckling Martin into the truck when he saw her standing by the fence, hands in her jacket pockets, looking uncertain. "Can we talk?" she called. Patrick glanced at Martin. The boy was absorbed in his tablet, headphones on. 2 minutes. They walked a few steps away from the truck, staying in his line of sight, but out of Martin's hearing. Virginia looked different. Thinner maybe, or just more worn. Dark circles under her eyes suggested sleep wasn't coming easily. "I didn't see what she was doing," she said without preamble. Her voice was quiet, fragile. "I didn't understand how much she was in my head until the judge said it out loud." Patrick waited. "I've been to therapy like the judge ordered. Individual sessions, not the family ones yet. Dr. Kramer asked me to write down memories of our marriage. Not conversations with Mom about the marriage. Just my own memories. Virginia's hands twisted together. Patrick, I couldn't remember anything bad. I tried. I sat there for an hour, trying to think of times you made me feel scared or threatened, and all I could remember were times Mom told me I should have felt that way. Okay, I'm so sorry. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I let her poison everything. I let her make me believe you were something you never were. I chose her over my family, and I destroyed our marriage, and her voice broke. Patrick watched his wife cry and felt the strangest distance from it all, like he was seeing her through glass, sympathetic but separate. I appreciate the apology, he said quietly, and I'm glad you're getting help. Is there any chance? Virginia looked up at him with something desperate in her eyes. Any chance we could try again? Start over? I'll keep seeing Dr. Kramer. I'll set boundaries with Mom. I'll do whatever it takes. This was the moment Patrick had imagined during the long nights of separation. His wife coming back, realizing her mistake, asking for another chance. He'd run through 100 versions of this conversation in his head. But standing here in the parking lot of Martin's school, watching Virginia cry and plead, he felt none of the triumph or vindication he'd expected. Just a deep, settling certainty. No, he said. Virginia's face crumpled. Please, I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust. But we have a son together. We could be a family again. We'll never be a family again, Virginia. Not the way we were. Patrick kept his voice gentle but firm. You chose your mother over us. Not once, but over and over. And even now, even with therapy, I don't trust that choice wouldn't happen again the next time Judy decides she knows better. I'll prove it to you. I'll cut her off completely if that's what you need. That's not what I need. Martin needs his mother, and that means you need to figure out your relationship with Judy in a way that's healthy for both of you. But I can't rebuild a marriage with someone who fundamentally didn't choose me when it mattered most. That's not fair. Patrick almost smiled. Maybe not, but it's honest. He glanced back at the truck where Martin was still absorbed in his tablet. I can forgive you, Virginia. For Martin's sake, I already have. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It just means I'm not carrying anger anymore. Virginia wiped her eyes, mascara smudging. So that's it? 7 years of marriage, and you're just done? You were done 3 months ago when you filed for divorce. I'm just accepting reality. What about Martin? Martin will be fine. He'll have 2 parents who love him, 2 homes where he's safe, and the knowledge that his father fought to protect him. That's more than a lot of kids get. Virginia nodded slowly, defeated. She pulled her car keys from her pocket. I really am sorry, Patrick. For all of it. I know. She walked away toward her sedan, shoulders hunched against more than just the afternoon breeze. Patrick watched her go and felt nothing but relief. He climbed back into his truck. Martin pulled off his headphones. Was that Mommy? Yeah, buddy. What did she want? Just to talk. Patrick started the engine. You hungry? Starving. Pizza. Martin's face lit up. Can we get the one with the stuffed crust? Sure. They drove toward their favorite pizza place, Martin chattering about his day. Something about a frog they'd found on the playground and how Mrs. Peterson had made them release it in the garden. Normal kid stuff. The kind of everyday magic that gets lost when adults are too busy fighting. Patrick let himself relax into it. The simple pleasure of his son's company. No Judy poisoning the background. No Virginia torn between loyalties. Just the 2 of them, figuring out this new shape their family would take. Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after Virginia's apology, Patrick decided to take Martin on an adventure. Nothing elaborate, just a drive out to Lake Ash Fork where the pine trees grew thick and the water was cold and clear. They packed sandwiches and juice boxes. Martin brought his fishing pole, though Patrick suspected they'd spend more time skipping rocks than actually fishing. The drive took 40 minutes through winding mountain roads, windows down, radio playing classic rock at low volume. Martin hummed along to Tom Petty, off-key and completely unself-conscious. Patrick glanced at him in the rearview mirror. 6 years old going on 7, missing a tooth in front, hair that refused to stay combed. The most important person in Patrick's entire world. Dad! Martin's voice broke through the music. Yeah, buddy? Is Grandma Judy coming back? Patrick had been expecting this question for weeks. Do you want her to? Martin thought about it seriously, The way kids do when adults actually ask their opinion. I don't know. She was mean sometimes, but she's also grandma. People can be both things. Mean sometimes and family other times. Are you mad at her? Patrick considered how to answer that honestly without poisoning Martin's relationship with his grandmother. I'm disappointed in choices she made, and I'm protecting you from those choices. But that doesn't mean you have to feel the same way I do. I don't think I miss her very much, Martin admitted quietly. Is that bad? No, it's honest. And honest is always better than pretending. They reached the lake and parked in the small dirt lot. The afternoon sun filtered through the pines, dappling everything in golden light. The water lapped at the shore with a gentle rhythm. Martin jumped out of the truck and ran toward the water, fishing pole forgotten. Patrick followed at a slower pace, carrying their lunch in a small cooler. They found a spot on the shore where smooth rocks made good skipping stones. Patrick taught Martin the proper grip, the sidearm throw, the angle needed to make the stone skip instead of plunk. Martin's first attempts all sank immediately, but he laughed each time, searching for another stone, trying again. Like this. He demonstrated his throw. Flatten your wrist a little more, and step into it. The next stone skipped once before sinking. I did it. Martin jumped up and down. Dad, did you see? It skipped. I saw. That was perfect. They spent an hour like that, throwing stones, eating sandwiches, watching dragonflies skim across the water's surface. Martin found a stick he declared was a magic wand and went on an elaborate quest to defeat an imaginary dragon. Patrick sat on the shore and watched his son play, heard his laughter echo across the water, saw him run and jump and exist fully in the moment without the weight of adult conflict crushing his shoulders. This was what Patrick had fought for, not the house or the marriage or his own pride. This, a small boy who felt safe enough to play pretend by a lake, who trusted his father to protect him, who didn't carry the burden of choosing between parents or navigating his grandmother's manipulation. The sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Patrick called Martin back. Time to head home, buddy. Already? Can't we stay a little longer? We'll come back next weekend. Promise. Martin ran over, muddy and happy and exhausted in the good way kids get after a day outside. He threw his arms around Patrick's waist. I love you, Dad. Patrick hugged him back, his throat suddenly tight. I love you too, son. So much. They packed up the truck and started the drive home as twilight settled over the mountains. Martin fell asleep in his booster seat within 10 minutes, head tilted against the window, stuffed dinosaur clutched to his chest. Patrick drove carefully through the darkening roads, radio off now, just the sound of the engine and his son's soft breathing. He'd lost a marriage, lost the home he'd imagined building, the future he'd planned, lost the illusion that love alone was enough to overcome fundamental incompatibility and toxic family dynamics. But he'd won something more important. He'd fought darkness with truth and protected his son from the person who would have shaped him into something small and controlled and afraid. Martin was safe. Martin was loved. Martin knew, without question, that his father would always choose him first. And that was everything. Patrick drove toward home as stars began to appear in the clear Arizona sky. His son sleeping peacefully in the back seat, and for the first time in months felt something like peace. The war with Judy Whitmore wasn't over. Women like her never truly surrendered. But Patrick had drawn boundaries she couldn't cross and established protections she couldn't manipulate around. Martin would grow up knowing he was worth fighting for. He would grow up knowing that truth mattered more than keeping peace. He would grow up knowing that sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is saying no to people who demand blind obedience. Patrick glanced at his son in the rearview mirror, small and sleeping and holy, perfectly himself. You're safe, he whispered. I've got you. Always. And he meant it with every fiber of his being. Nothing, not Judy, not Virginia, not the entire weight of the legal system, would ever make Patrick stop protecting his son. Martin was his purpose, his fight, his everything. And Patrick Monroe would never let anyone hurt him again.